All right, so we are back interviewing another POW conference speaker. This is one of my personal heroes, probably saved my butt more times than I can count at this point, more times than he'll even tell me. This is Dr. Wade Fuqua, who is not only the chief clinical officer at my practice, he is also the CEO of semi-private practice as of the first of this year. So excited to have you at POW conference. You're actually one of the
Absolutely.
core organizers. So we got you on the calendar twice. I want to
hmm
talk about your fractional compliance workshop, but first, give me just a little background on who you are, what you do, what your expertise is, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So by training, I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor. So seeing a little bit of everything, done anything from school-based to couples work, but then started adding working in the Medicaid space, in accreditation, compliance, and those types of things. And over the years at CFT, kind of started building a compliance program. And along the way, picked up CARF accreditation at our practice, as well as a surveyor status myself. I do 3 or 4 a year, teach ethics and all types of things, sit on a few insurance, credentialing and quality assurance committees as well. So have a few different fingers in quality assurance and compliance.
Love it. And one of the things that I think you're notorious for is quality assurance or compliance with a heart,
Yep,
not avoiding that agency mindset.
absolutely.
For those of you that have never met Wade, one of my mottos running the practice for years has been no lawsuits, no jumpsuits. I don't want to go to court and I don't want to go to jail. Wade has done a spectacular job keeping both of those things at bay. So your workshop or one of the ones you're doing for the POW conference is compliance leadership without a headcount, a fractional model. Tell the folks watching this at home what that is, and specifically, if you would, what the fractional model kind of means or looks like.
Absolutely. A lot of folks coming into group practice, if they've come somewhere else, have, agency-minded compliance where it's very rigid, it's very, there's just a ton of training and all that kind of stuff that doesn't feel very applicable. So
Mm,
I think what we try to do at our practice is anti-gotcha
mm.
compliance is the way that I try to call it, to develop a collaborative, kind relationship, but doing so in a way that doesn't happen with you having to have a cost of a whole compliance department either. So trying to build internal knowledge and internal resources for folks who may be interested in that, but helping you get off the ground before you've sunk a ton of time and money into training. In other words, like some of us need this stuff pretty quick. And so most of us have like kind of an oh crap moment. And so that's when we need to bring compliance in. You can't really wait for that whole curve, like we did at our practice. And it took several years. And so a fractional model brings external knowledge and expertise paired with internal interest,
Mm.
and need to be able to build a program that fits your practice that is not, one size fits all, because that doesn't work for everybody.
I love it. Well, and it kills two birds with one stone. In our 1F groups and our streamline groups, these cohort groups we have for practice owners, our big KPI that we're obsessed with right now is admin cost per session, right? Like how do we bring down those administrative costs? And compliance or a compliance person is one of them. So the fractional idea is Wade, whose time is very expensive, you only need a little bit of that, right? And then you're essentially training
Mhm.
somebody internally, which also gives practices a leadership opportunity for
Right.
another clinician there without giving them $100,000 promotion, right?
Yeah, it gives you some structure. It gives you a almost like a treatment plan, if you will, for
Mm.
compliance at your practice that someone else can help drive internally. Check in with me once a month or more, depending upon what is needed. And there's always save some time for kind of that surprise moment. So we may schedule some time, but there's always going to be something extra, that I save that space for because I don't want someone to feel like they can't reach out. And so that's kind of part of it of just building what fits for someone and yeah, elevating someone internally. I think that's a really helpful strategy for a lot of practices where there may not be the opportunity for that. And there's usually at least one or two clinicians in a practice that's interested in documentation or notes or is a little bit of a nerd in that department. And that's usually your go-to person.
Yeah, so unpack that for me a little more because I think a lot of practice owners have this. I need to give something else to somebody to do so they don't leave and go start their own practice or whatever. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of loyalty promotions in a lot of practices, and a loyalty promotion can put the wrong person in this role. If you had a short list of what are you looking for the person in their practice that would work with a fractional compliance officer, what should be on their checklist? Who are they looking for in their practice?
I think you need someone who is, knowledgeable about, ethics and regulatory things, laws, board complaints, all that kind of stuff. Someone who just kind of is naturally attentive to those things. Someone who is comfortable with asking really hard questions, I think is another way to put that too.
Mm-hmm.
And dealing with kind of that tension of this is what the rules may say, and this is what's happening, and what do we do with that? That's
Mm-hmm.
a really difficult place to be. And if your practice is used to just kind of like, okay, this is how we do things, someone who's kind of okay with asking some questions of why are we doing it that way. Um, Plus, I think someone who is, relatively organized, right? You need someone who is operationally minded, who can make sure they follow some processes because there's some pretty clear workflows in these things. So you want someone who's more of what I would call maybe like an implementer in that process, not someone who is big picture vision. That's usually the practice owner who's gently guiding them, like, let's stay out of trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone who can translate that into some steps.
Well, and I would tack on there. I think you kind of alluded to it, but for me as a CEO, one of the best things you bring to the table is an ability to confront me and say we have to look at this, or this is an issue.
Mhm.
Um, to not even be a yes man for me, like
Mhm.
to say I'm not comfortable with this one or whatever. That person has to be willing to call you out, and you need to be willing to hear it from them. I think that's not that that's been easy for you at times, but
Sure.
I appreciate it for sure.
Yeah, I think it makes a difference. And I think also dealing with ambiguity and finding
Mhm.
strategies to deal with that. Yesterday, one of the questions I had was, will the insurance company allow me to do in fill in the blank? And there's a ton of these questions. And my answer is always going to be, what's the contract say? What does the insurance company say? So then the other strategy I think is how do you get answers to questions that are not wanting to be given, right? The insurance company
Mhm.
doesn't want to do that. So what's the strategy to help figure out keeping your practice safe, keeping yourself out of trouble, avoiding a recoupment, but needing something to figure out a path forward? We can't just be stuck.
Mhm.
And so that's where you have to balance that like kind of creativity as well as the vision with the operational like red tape, so to speak.
Mhm. That kind of leads to maybe my last question for you, but is this something that's only applicable to group practices, or do solo practices need to be thinking about compliance? Do they need to be thinking about HIPAA training? Do they need to be thinking about notes audits?
Yeah.
And how can they work with somebody like you if they're a solo practitioner?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge is that so far group practices have kind of shouldered a lot of the compliance stuff, the audits and whatnot, but they are absolutely going out into solo practices where, things being overbilled, things being billed incorrectly. There's some really simple processes, some red flags. My number one is always just time and time again, clinicians will bill, for 60 minutes and they only saw them for 50. That just doesn't work in an insurance model. You
Mhm.
have to bill based off of the CPT codes. Those are really easy things to fix and things that I would encourage anyone to be attentive to, not just a group practice, solo practitioners included, being careful about some simple settings in, your EHRs and documentation. So absolutely, anything down to HIPAA. There's a ton of now new fines that are out there related to HIPAA that you're seeing more and more smaller practitioners get, not just big hospital systems for breaches. So we really do have to be attentive to these things working in the healthcare space in kind of an audit-minded world where we are.
Mhm. Yeah. Love it. Well, excited to have you at POW conference. I know this is the stuff that people know is there and they don't want to
Mhm.
think about. And I think a lot of practice owners are seeing their peers at smaller and smaller levels get kind of in
Mhm.
the crosshairs. So I think it's very timely. Excited to hear from you. I'll be sitting in on yours personally. Just I love the idea of fractionalized help to save money. So
Mhm.
we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Take care.